Someone asks what the hell is going on, and the girl with long hair says it's incredible and asks if everyone just saw it. The guy confirms it. The men can't believe they actually did it. Those guys from Swift Whale, with just one group, managed to complete the most difficult task. The man exclaims that they just defeated a raid boss with only 6 people. Tenma says he became the strongest in the world after undergoing training before his reincarnation. He says he's already prepared, and now his second life is going smoothly. The man shouts that it was the fastest takeover ever. The girl invites him to come over and tell his story. The boy asks Tenma if he thinks this group is crazy. Tenma agrees. The guy says he wasn't paying attention. They tell Tenma he's in the way. He apologizes, and someone else says he's blocking the view. Tenma steps away and turns around. The reporter says he can't believe the smash skill turned out to be the boss's weakness and asks how they found out. The man explains that one of their team members kept running tests and eventually figured it out, turning to Tenma and then, surprised, asks him to wait. The reporter asks what happened. The man explains that the person he needs isn't there. Someone from the crowd says that they'll be leaving now. The guy says he'll send the video as soon as it's uploaded. The reporter agrees, and one of the team members says goodbye. The man finds Tenma and asks how he's doing. Tenma explains he's been checking the area just in case and shows off the elixir he found, hidden by the raid boss, offering everyone a drink. The man says it's wonderful and offers to toast it. The guy makes a toast. The drink is alcoholic. A player writes that the special weakness Tenma discovered worked perfectly. Another player asks if he spent a lot of time and resources to figure it out. The girl replies that people really do underestimate Tenma. Tenma replies in the negative. Tenma writes that it was everyone's combined effort. He says he never asked them to quit their jobs and become professionals like him, and then he's very glad he joined this team. The guy says he's still looking for work and is having difficulty, so he couldn't say something like that. The man asks if Tenma is some kind of secret elite specialist. Tenma says he works for a black company and isn't even a full-time employee, but rather a part-timer. The player says this is too unexpected, and the guy reveals that Mishi Nakajima received a job offer. Nishi Nakajima announces that he's starting work at the trading company this spring as a new employee and thanks Tenma for his advice. The other players congratulate him. Tenma says it's great and wants to do his best for both of them. Tenma believes that in the gaming world, results always correspond to effort, and if success is fair, no difficulty seems too difficult. A player asks if it's true that their generation suffered greatly during the recession while looking for work. Another player agrees, comparing it to an ice age. He explains that they were destined to lose from the start, and the game was hopeless. Tenma asks if it's an earthquake. Tenma reports that he collapsed. A player reports that Tenma isn't responding. Tenma swears and thinks he should clean the rug, but his body isn't there. Another player asks if he fell asleep and reports that he seemed very busy lately. Tenma is sitting. Tenma asks what this place is and says it's not a hospital. He also asks who the girl is and assumes she's a foreigner. Tenma is reported to have arrived. The woman asks if his name is really Yamada. She explains that he died suddenly while playing a game. Tenma thanks her and says he understands. The woman asks if he's surprised, to which Yamada replies that he's not really holding anything back. The woman reports a request for reincarnation from another world, one where skills and magic exist, and that this world is very similar to the game Tenma played. Tenma is surprised that such things actually exist, but with his characteristics, it might be impossible. Tenma notices something beeping, and the woman replies that it's normal. Tenma asks what it is. The girl explains that reincarnators return to the age of 14 and that there's a training center where they can explore the world for 3 months beforehand. Tenma is delighted, thinking it's a tutorial, and that 3 months might be ideal for a gamer like him. Tenma asks if it's possible to acquire skills and magic during training, and the woman replies that, generally speaking, yes. Yamada asks about the assessment or the inventory. The girl asks not to talk to her now. Tenma thinks she can't multitask. The girl says that she doesn't have enough time and doesn't know what to do, but Tenma thinks about her. Tenma says she doesn't look like she's from another world and that it might be a recruiting agency. Tenma thinks she too seems to be having trouble. The woman says the next step is an assessment and the man asks what that is. The girl explains that you can adjust your aptitudes to determine your specialization, but for each bonus, you need to take 2 penalties. Tenma thinks the part about penalties is bothering him. The man asks if he won't receive any bonuses or penalties if he doesn't take anything, to which he is told that's exactly it. Tenma says he'd like to think about it carefully. The woman apologizes and says she'll hurry, adding that she thinks Tenma thinks she's incompetent. Tenma says he agrees with that and that there's no other option. Tenma says he'll choose the settings without modifiers. The girl is surprised. Tenma explains that it's easier to experiment with the standard settings. She thanks him and explains the skills. The girl explains that training ends when level 10 is reached, or 3 months have passed in time perception, and asks if there are any other questions. Tenma asks what the word perception means. The girl says to wait a second. The woman apologizes and says she made a mistake again. Tenma reports that he's losing consciousness. The guy sighs. Wow! Tenma asks what the hell this is and sees a screen welcoming him to the reincarnation training center. Tenma explains that his body feels very light and he bounces. Tenma goes into the workshop, then into the library. Tenma reports that he found it. Tenma is surprised that he looks very young. Training base for reincarnationists and a training house. Enma reads that the name is set to Tenma and that the status and other information can be checked on the monitor in the office, and states that he will write down everything he learns from his research. Tenma explains that the object is a circular island, 100 kilometers in diameter, and that monsters are found all over the island, but he only gains experience by defeating those in dungeons. Tenma wonders if the bird is a monster and whether it can be eaten, then decides it's delicious. Tenma informs them that they're given 3,000 yen a day, and they can buy food from a monitor that looks like a convenience store, but they can also cook for themselves in the kitchen. Tenma says he's hesitant to eat monsters yet and plans to stock up on store-bought food for now. Tenma asks if this is also included in the daily supply. Then he clarifies that this amount is calculated for 1 day. Tenma explains that he can't use it all in 1 day. Just Tenma is surprised that he was even given high-level healing potions and remembers how everyone clinked glasses together. Tenma believes that if this is reflected in his stats, he will be able to progress very effectively. Tenma is delighted. He reports that an item window has appeared and thanks the girl, adding that at least she was a little out of sorts. Tenma says, "Let the testing begin then." The woman says that for a low-ranking employee like her, being called into the management meeting room is not easy. She thinks she's not getting along with her new boss. The girl asks if it's yet another reincarnation that's caused problems again. The boss says that's exactly it and asks if there are any ideas who it could be. The girl says the current old man is still in training and speculates whether it could be the previous villain or the hero from the previous 3 cases. The boss says that all 3 of her previous colleagues have abandoned their roles and that the gods in those worlds are bombarding them with complaints. He calls the girl Anna. The boss says that if they were all lined up, there must be a reason for it. Anna says it's her fault and asks if she'll be fired. Anna wonders what she'll do starting tomorrow and whether she'll receive unemployment benefits. Her boss says someone needs to take responsibility, otherwise the situation won't be resolved, and asks Anna if she can explain what responsibility really means. Anna suggests that this is the responsibility of a responsible person. The man replies that this is wrong and that she still doesn't know the true meaning, in which case he won't allow her to take the blame. The man says he'll take responsibility and asks not to worry, asking about the reincarnator's current condition. Anna explains that he's undergoing intensive training at a rate of 1 month per hour. 1 hour equals 1 year. Tenma says that everything is fine and that's all that's needed to make potions. Tenma explains that if what he moved from the supply section to his inventory is still there tomorrow, then the duplication worked, adding that there's no such thing as too many potions. Tenma says that he even put some food from the store in there and there's still room, and that it's a shame that everything will disappear at the end of training, but that's to be expected. An indoor training ground. Tenma says it looks like what he saw in the video, the ball hitting the floor. Tenma says he's giving up. Then he says it's his first try, so it's okay. Tenma says he doesn't know how strong basic stats are in this world, so he needs to develop his own plan. He considers his stats: human, 14 years old, male, intelligence 50, strength 50, dexterity 50, luck 50, agility 50, no title, and his skills: language comprehension level 2, life magic, certification, and inventory. Tenma says he's confident leveling up will increase his stats, but he wants to know if it's possible to increase his stats before leveling up, and if so, he'd like to increase them. He explains that if mana increases by a fixed amount with each level, then it's worth focusing on leveling up. But if it increases proportionally, then it's better to increase skills before leveling up. Costs. Tenma says the problem is that he doesn't know how to increase stats without leveling up. Tenma explains that in a game he played in his past life, Using or depleting mana increased the maximum value. He suggests it's worth a try. Tenma tries to focus. Then he shouts a time spell. Tenma explains that the time spell costs 5 mana and says that she'll likely be using life magic frequently, so it's best to improve her mastery. Then Tenma says it's time to move on to the next one. Tenma conjures water, then conjures fire. Tenma conjures a blast of air, then conjures a pit. He says it was close. Tenma says he feels dizzy. Tenma says he's going to reset his settings and use light magic. Then he stumbles and says he can't stand. He realizes this is what happens when mana runs out. Tenma thinks it makes sense that fatigue that causes nausea happens in real life too, and says it's really hard but he needs to check it out. He casts a sleek spell. Tenma asks about his mana. Tenma explains that the maximum MP hasn't changed, and he needs to repeat the experiment several times to confirm. He reports that natural MP regeneration is approximately 1 mana per minute. Tenma says that there are 20 minutes left until he is fully recovered, and he is going to rest. Tenma says he sees the sea. Tenma is going to have a snack. Tenma says he's been thinking lately that it might be nice to just stay here. He tells himself there's no time for such thoughts and orders him to get back to training. A mana drain, mana regeneration, depletion, regeneration. And then Tenma says it's much easier now than the first time and suggests that he might be building up resistance. Calm God. Tenma announces that his status is open. He has 50-50 health and 51 mana, and then exclaims with joy. Tenma says his stat boost test was successful. Tenma says that he can handle it and that it is completely doable. Tenma shouts that there are 3 more months and he's going to ruin it. Tenma explains that for 23 hours of the first day of training, he had no idea about the trap set by the training's management. The man announces that the first case is closed. Anna tries to remember if she set the timer for the training to end. The man says he needs to talk to her and asks her to come with him. Tenma explains that his motivation was off the charts. Anna agrees. Tenma explains that the second chapter of the new series centers on a gamer who laboriously undergoes endless training and wonders when he will reach another world. Anna drinks an energy drink. Anna sighs and says the sugar and caffeine are finally starting to kick in, noting that it was really tough. Anna doesn't understand why Department Head Hagen is covering up for a reincarnated person like her with all these problems. Suggests that perhaps he plans to use her for something even worse. Hagen advises Anna to eat at least a little something. Anna thanks him! Anna calls out to Hagen's boss. Anna asks what he meant earlier by the true meaning of responsibility. Hagen explains that the true nature of responsibility is the shadow of power. Anna asks again about the shadow. Hagen says that during the evaluation, Anna said that the strong, abstract sense of justice toward the first reincarnated person made her doubt his suitability as a hero. Hagen says Anna could call it an authority figure's double. Anna agrees and explains that she was then questioned about why she didn't do anything. Hagen chuckles and asks if that's true, that he kept repeating the same petty story. Hagen clarifies that it was completely pointless. The man asks Anna if she had the authority to change her tight schedule. Anna replies negatively. Hagen asks if she had the authority to organize an additional aptitude test, to which she replies that she didn't. The man reports that the previous department had allegedly told her not to create additional work, reporting on every little detail. Anna agrees. Hagen says, common sense dictates that where there is no authority, there is no responsibility. He adds that too many people are trying to make this convenient. Hagen says that, as the new department head, he will take responsibility for this issue and wants everyone to work harder. Anna says that if another such reincarnated person comes next time, she'll think about how best to respond. Hagen chuckles. Hagen says that Anna is actually a more capable person than people think. Hagen says they'll use the upcoming investigation to convince their superiors of the need for a new system. Anna is surprised. Hagen says he'll handle that part himself. Hagen asks how the reincarnated man is doing now. Anna says that enough time has passed and the training should be complete as there have been no alarming signals. She assumes he is surviving in his reincarnated world. Hagen agrees. He asked if it's true that 1 hour here equals 1 month at the training center. Hagen reports that after approximately 3 hours or 3 months, the automatic transformation occurs. Anna is surprised. Hagen asks for the recording of the interview with him. Hagen says he understands. Tenma explains that his lifespan is almost a month long, and his notebook is starting to wear out. He remembers that he must use up his current food allowance, as he's still at level 1. Tenma explains that if he reaches level 10, his training will end and he won't be able to try what he wants, so for now, he's focusing on improving his stats, skills, and level. Tenma says, this dish combination is the best right now. He explains that he gets 3,000 yen a day for food and explains that since the food doesn't carry over to the next day, he tries to use it all up in one day. Tenma says the food doesn't change, so he's trying to be creative to avoid getting bored, but he's already reaching his limit. Tenma thanks him for the food. Tenma explains that, like food rations, elixirs reset the next day whether used or not, and if he wants to keep something, he can put it in his inventory to transfer it, but he hasn't used this elixir even once. Tenma exclaims that he forgot to put his notebook in his inventory. That's where everything is! Tenma explains that the daily resets are surprisingly tedious. He doesn't believe it. Hagen reports that he reviewed the records of the recent reincarnation procedure. Hagen says he asked precise questions in a short period of time and was attentive to Anna, asking if he wasn't a good young man. He's surprised that he is a young man. Anna says he seemed very unreliable. Hagen disagrees, explaining that he wishes he were his subordinate, which is why he was summoned to the world of reincarnation. Hagen says the current transformation training system seems safe, but it has a major problem. Anna asks what this is, even though the system resets every night. Hagen says that's exactly it. He explains that in a special environment where you can't talk to anyone and everything resets daily, a normal person would be unlikely to survive more than 3 months alone. Hagen reports that most people level up and complete their training before that point. Anna says this is true and that every reincarnated person has been transferred within 3 months. Anna agrees that being alone for 3 months is indeed very difficult. Hagen reasons that this doesn't mean there's no solution to loneliness and then tells him it's time to go. Hagen announces it's time to begin the second part and suggests they go. He asks what that look is. Anna explains, it's too hard. The man asks, didn't he say he's already taken responsibility, and tells her not to worry. Anna asks to wait and says that she feels like she is forgetting something important. Okay. Tenma greets Orca and says that it's the same old day again, and Orca apologizes and says that she doesn't quite understand. Tenma says good morning to the bird. The boy says good morning to the flowers, then notices the stone and calls it a beautiful trophy. Tenma explains that he initially collected the stones to test the equipment's capacity, but it turned out to be perfect for a certain type of training, and he believes 200 stones should be enough. He throws a stone. He says it's the 5th throw, then the 10th throw, then he says 150. He says it's the last throw. Tenma says 200. The man says that now. He tells you to concentrate around your navel and gather mana, then orders you to move. Tenma says that mana control is an essential skill for learning and using magic, and although training is boring, such repetition is necessary. He explains that he thought he would be practicing this from the very beginning. The man makes sounds of effort! Tenma sits by the water and looks at the floating feather, holding. He says there's a recipe for guinea fowl in the library encyclopedia and advises that he should probably get used to local ingredients. He bends down to the ground. In the background, a girl walks along the road. Tenma says the stones are always in the same place and are the same size every day. He notices that one of the stones looks familiar. Then they show someone putting on a glove. He reports that these are Iozana's brave companions. He explains that he is cutting something with a knife. The woman says that tomorrow is exactly 30 days, a whole month. Tenma says he doesn't quite understand. The man apologizes. He explains that he has learned to drain his HP and MP to the point of exhaustion, then use restorative items to repeat this cycle several times a day, and that he has even developed both mental and physical resistance to the side effects of exhaustion. Tenma reports that, especially after acquiring the concentration skill, his growth rate has increased significantly. But even so, he only has 60 days left. He explains this with some concern. He says he's lucky to have so many opportunities to experiment and asks if his interlocutor shares his opinion. The doll says good night to Doyle, temporary name. Tenma says ah and oh no. The image also includes the date and time, month. 1 day, 37, 8 a.m. Go! The guy says he doesn't quite understand. He explains that because of his mistake, Doyle was reset and screams that everything is lost. The door opens. Tenma says he's feeling a little down now and wonders what kind of world awaits on the other side. He explains that it would be great if there were beastmen there. An eye-headed man, a bull-headed man, a dog-headed woman, a bird-headed man, a flower-headed man, and a bear-headed man. Listen to a report. The woman reports that her report and suggested improvements are complete. The eye-headed man explains that the report is good. The man explains that he understands what the interviewees are trying to say. None of them realize the potential problems before reading her report. The man with glasses says he probably misunderstood. The woman says it's unlikely management could have been so careless. The woman asks why high-ranking people enjoy meetings so much. She wonders how the man is doing now, hoping he's eating something tasty and drinking sake. The man says he's hungry. The man reports that 2 months have passed, and it's now day 90, 10:54 p.m. He says he's saying goodbye to his life of training and that the time for his reincarnation will soon come. Tenma says that over the past 3 months, leveling up skills was one thing, but the opportunity to eat now is a big victory. He says that the fried guinea fowl is very tasty and that he is glad that he leveled up his throwing skill. Tenma says this is the last time he'll be eating traditional modern Japanese food and says he intends to enjoy it. The man says that, but he says it's time. The man replies that yes. The boy counts the numbers 5 and 4 out loud. Tenma says the number 1, then an image of the number 2 appears, followed by the number 3 being heard against a background of a clock showing the time 11:59 p.m. The boy says he was supposed to be reborn. The man says this with surprise. Tenma says it's been exactly 3 months and clarifies that it's exactly 3 months, not a 31-day calculation. Tenma says it will probably happen when he wakes up from sleep. The man looks away silently. He says he uses Chaser's water flow magic. He explains that he deliberately delayed killing monsters to level up until 3 months had passed, prioritizing MP, other stats, and skill mastery. The reason was to make the most of the training facilities. Tenma explains that according to the materials, there are countless monsters in the world of reincarnation, and increasing stats and skill requires constant, subtle effort, which is the most effective approach. But he doesn't believe there is an environment that allows for such effective, repetitive training. He reports that, believing this, he diligently continued his training, feeling both a little satisfaction with his progress and anxiety about the reincarnated world, after which he fell asleep. Tenma says noon, then opens his eyes and rubs them with his hand. He says that he has not been reincarnated. He then asks if he has misunderstood something and asks to be given time to think about it. Tenma says that could be the case. The woman explains that instead of 3 months or exceeding level 10, it was 3 months and exceeding level 10. He says that if he doesn't level up, he can try all sorts of things as much as he wants, and first he'll try scythe techniques or maybe magic. The man reports that 6 months have passed. Day 1 read at 6:30 p.m. The man sighs. Tenma says that he is completely warmed up and that the bath is truly the best, and also states that it is nothing compared to pure magic. It is reported that 3 months have passed since then, and there are still no signs of reincarnation. He says the word Dewey. Tenma reports that his only real concern was food and supplies, but they continue to be provided. Tenma says, whom? Dolphin asks if the size has increased. He reports that the system wasn't designed to last longer than 90 days. Dolphin confirms this. He explains that it's a whale and looks like it has found a reliable, possibly partner. Tenma says it can't be deleted. Tenma looks at his hand, which quickly presses the button. Tenma stands and looks worried. The boy turns to Orca and asks if the training ends in 3 months and why the reincarnation hasn't started yet. Orca asks to call her Gale and asks to ask questions one at a time. Tenma says the training was supposed to end right after 3 months for an unknown reason and suggests they calm down first. Tenma expresses disbelief. Tenma asks if someone has suddenly become lonely and started talking about random things. The man says Gale's name. The man makes a sound of displeasure. The character states that in his case, he simply strayed from his planned schedule and also explains that being a Navi, he is too high performance, so most of his functions had to be blocked, and he considers it unlikely that he became lonely. Tenma says the wall is flattening and asks what it is. He explains that someone made this navigator. Tenma expresses surprise. The guy asks if this is a bug in the training system, and he confirms it. The text states that although the scheduled training period has passed, he hasn't respawned, so a bug must have appeared, which is minor and doesn't cause any real harm. Tenma asks what he should do if the bedroom gets cold. The dog says she has a good idea and should first use the system that resets daily. He reports that with continued training, he has learned to imbue the weapon with mana, which significantly increases its strength and sharpness. He says the weapon is quite durable, but he will use it here. Tenma breaks the wall with his sword. Tenma continues to break the wall. The man reports that the wall has been destroyed. Tenma stands in the gap in the wall, alarms sounding around him. He says the situation is bad and very bad. Then he reports that the room seems normal. Tenma says he barely made it this time, but he's worried that if similar bugs appear in the future, the entire room behind the wall could disappear. He explains that he's considering using magic to deal with it, and that he should also move the supplies. On the overhead panel, a robot makes growling sounds. A woman reports that she hasn't been in the office since yesterday due to work meetings and notes a beeping sound upon entering. She notices on the screen that the training facility is heavily damaged and reports a forced reincarnation, asking what to do next. The girl says she doesn't understand why she hasn't reincarnated yet, explaining that it's a mistake in her settings. She wonders what to do next and sees the message, "Forced reincarnation," on the screen. The man hears a phone ringing. The girl notices the call and calls out the name, Anna. The woman reports that she didn't notice the time limit warning because it wasn't set, but the man noticed it because of the equipment damage alarm. Huggins says he understood. The man speaks to Anna, thanking her for her frankness. Anna responds with a question. How? The man says the worst thing would be if he simply forcibly reincarnated him and swept the matter under the rug, so he needs to quickly bring him back and apologize for his level of fatigue. That's the top priority. He explains that he'll discuss this with management along with the incident report and also asks if it's necessary. A man says he spent 15 years alone in a gym and worries about his mental health. The top right frame states that 6 months have passed. Day 187. The time is 6:33 p.m. Tenma explains that nothing changes every day and he's been trapped inside this screen for 6 months. Tenma says this is his limit and he can't take it anymore. Tenma asks for Gale. The guy says that for him too, the monotonous training space is a trap and asks if it wouldn't be better for Tenma that he can at least go outside. He explains that if it were up to him, he would try until all his skills were at their maximum. Par! Tenma announces that he will stop improving his skills here and will focus on raising his race's level from tomorrow, and that after the training is completed, Gale will also be released from here. Tenma suggests discussing this. Gale says that Tenma is a good person and explains that even if his level exceeds, he tells Gale that he's been racking his brains, and now she can open her eyes. He explains that he was trying to recreate the place where he always trains. Gale says she can't believe it's a dream. The text explains that Dimension Zone is one of the spatial spells. Tenma informs him that copies can be created anywhere from the center of the island and asks him to let him know if he has any requests. The man explains that using such advanced magic during training is amazing and asks what Tenma's status is. He says he's been focusing on leveling up lately and hasn't looked at the detailed stats and offers to look them over together. The creature says this is the first time he's seen someone with such high skill. Tenma explains that they continued training together in a world that reset every day. Tenma explains that he's studying something in a book at the table. Tenma explains that he's cooking. Tenma sits on a raised platform and looks out the window at the scenery. Fingers place the figurine on a shelf with other figurines. The text states that 12 years have passed since the narrator's death. The boy doesn't recognize this room and asks if it's another mistake. Tenma explains that it's part of spatial magic, specifically the room-by-room ability. For now, it's only one room, but as his life magic level increases, the number of rooms will increase and they will become larger. Tenma explains that. The guy says that the goddess of this world, Lady Therese, created this place for a reason and asks if there's some misunderstanding going on. He says that the goddess may have placed hidden conditions on reincarnation and explains that since we're talking about Lady Therese, Tenma says they should try it and says they have time, no matter how long it takes. He explains that hidden conditions could be, for example, spending a certain amount of time in the dungeon or defeating the strongest monster. Finally, it's Tenma and Guy's time conquering the dungeon. He says that loneliness is hard. He drives away monsters with a torch. He runs away from a monster with a club. The man in the chest is silent. He examines the cave with a lantern. The inscription states that 3 years have passed since the conquest began. Tenma studies a map spread out on the floor. The man stands before large closed doors, staff in hand. It has been reported that 14 hours have passed since the battle with the ancient dragon, the final boss of the lowest level of the dungeon, began. Tenma says retreating would be beneficial, even though he's trained for a long time for a long-lived species and his efforts will likely be wasted. He explains that if everyone were here, it would be very simple, but acting alone and even creating a single amusement is an impossible game, and he says that if he dies for sure, then all 15 years of suffering will be in vain. He is surprised and thinks that this is the first time he hears such a phrase from this creature and wonders if it has weakened significantly. He reports that there is only one potion left in his inventory and asks. Tenma says he can't believe a dragon doesn't know what baseball is. Tenma explains that baseball is a game where you hit a ball with a bat and catch it. The dragon announces that the fight was futile and that it is time to finish off the enemy. Then he notices that the object has bent. Tenma shouts that we need to act now. The dragon makes a sound and opens its mouth. The dragon says he is a fool, and he is not. He screams and makes sounds. He reports that he has collapsed. The girl is silent. Tenma is silent. The guy reports that her leg... Tenma says that if he can't help, no one else can. He explains that he can't let someone he cares about die. He says it's a rusty and crumbling old abandoned trap, and the wound needs to be cleaned with water magic first. Tenma says it would be easier if he had an elixir. He explains that it's not his leg, so he can't determine how much pressure to apply, and notes that the leg is very thin. Right. Buzz. The image contains no text or characters, only nature. There is no one to describe the speech or actions. The boy says he can't understand what happened and that he can't remember how he got there. The girl blinks and says she's awake. The girl turns her head in different directions, looking around. Then she sits down on the ground and says that she thanks God. The girl says her name is Tenma, her older brother. Tenma asks her name and where she lives. The girl is surprised and repeats her older brother's name, Tenma. The girl says she's forgotten her name and doesn't know where her home is. The man thinks he's weird. Tenma says he hasn't spoken to anyone other than Gale in a while, and he thinks she understands what he's saying. He wonders what that guy would do at a time like this. The woman explains that the girl's parents likely instilled in her not to reveal the village's location to strangers, calling her a smart child. The girl reports that she must be a resident of a small, recently founded, self-sufficient pioneer village. The girl says that her clothes and even her sandals match. Tenma says she must be very scared, but she handles it so well, which earns him serious admiration. Tenma then wonders if he's in serious trouble. A guy turns to a girl, explaining that he has urgent business and says goodbye, wishing her well. The girl watches the guy walk away. Tenma says it works. He explains that during training, when his spatial awareness skill reached level 3, he unlocked map tracking, and now, thanks to the updated version, he can see everything within a 5-kilometer radius, including monsters. Tenma says that regardless of whether it's family or friends, it's essential. The upper right section depicts footprints leading into the forest. On the right, the man announces that they are close to home, and the girl says she is tired and wants to rest. On the left, the man explains that they will soon be home, and the girl says she wants to be carried. Tenma says that she is lost again and expresses surprise. The woman explains that she would have chosen a detour to hide the village's location, and the man says that if he were a bandit or a suspicious character, he would have acted differently. He explains that it makes sense and that this isn't a game and that this world is also reality. Tenma says he always makes a bad first impression. He explains that in his past life, this happened everywhere, including in online games. Tenma says that bad first impressions always got him into trouble and notices that someone is taking a big detour. He explains that in his opinion, he reports that there are monsters in this forest, but none of them are strong enough to pose a threat, and if he were reborn just 3 months later, this place would be the perfect difficulty level for him. Tenma reports that he hasn't had any real human contact since then. The man explains that they cut down a huge tree today, and the field will be arable by next year. The man and woman discuss when the trader from Rhonda will be coming again. The woman says she'll ask Langa later, Tenma explains. He says it's a shame he didn't make a better first impression. The man explains that he's trying to do something with the stone. Tenma explains that he's going to cut the door with a knife. He begins cutting the door, and then a treehouse in the forest is shown. He draws an arrow at a target. He stands holding arrows and fish in his hands. A man with a towel around his neck says that the arrows fly right on target. The man climbs under a tree. Tenma says he's not afraid. Tenma explains he's not going to give up. The man looks at Tenma. The girl looks back, then jumps off the fence and starts running. He reports that she's sneaking out again, probably to practice. The man reports that the village has only one gate, guarded by 4 people, and the strongest of them is a young wolf with a wolf skin. Tenma tells Langa. The man says that if anything happens, he'll definitely report it to his father. Another man explains that this guy is the most talkative in their group and asks why he looks so stupid. Does he still dream of becoming an adventurer? The text states that the population is about 120 people, roughly. The man explains that the well in the square is the source of water and that it looks like it had to be dug very deep. He also says that the village elder is an old man who thinks too much of himself. The guy reports that the girl has stopped, then is surprised that she's already finished and asks her not to leave. The guy explains that the girl is practicing swordsmanship on her own and that it's not bad. Tenma says he wishes things like affection level and social skills had a numerical value that could be easily leveled up. Then he sighs. The man asks if he understood correctly that the girl's name is Anna. Anna confirms that it is and identifies the man as her boss, Hagen! The guy asks the man if he's getting the right one, with milk and no sugar. The man thanks him. The girl drinks the drink. The man turns to his boss and tells him about the secretary who works for the executive, Hayes. The man says, wow, and the girl says the same. The man clenches his teeth and sweats. The man says he made a few moves last night and Hayes will soon have to take charge. The man drinks from his glass and sets it down on the table. The man reports that there have been no complaints from Tenma's reincarnation district, and the woman says, that's good. The man explains that he was worried that Tenma's stats and abilities might be too strong for the district, but he's confident Tenma can handle it as he's a cautious guy. The man says that if there's one thing that worries him, it's the other person's excessive caution. Tenma reports that there are only 500 meters left to the village, then counts down to 400. He explains that he has already studied the situation and now it is time to act. He asks how he became so good at evaluating things. The man replies that he simply tried a lot and made a lot of mistakes. He stands aside and thinks about it. The woman explains that every time she failed or succeeded, she took notes, carefully observed, compared, and repeated, and the man explains that leveling up helps, but there are things you can only learn from mistakes. The man tells Tenma that he's going to try too. The woman reports that her second life after reincarnation has become the strongest in the other world in easy mode. The girl on the woman's shoulders talks about preparation, and the woman with the basket explains that she over-prepared. Tenma says he'll tell her again. The man says there's good news and bad news and asks which one Tenma wants to hear first. The boy asks to start with the bad news, and the man says that it sounds like Tenma. He says that the only thing he doesn't want is to go to the training space again to learn, and the man expresses regret for Tenma, but Penguin explains that he can only materialize in this room and cannot leave it, so he won't be able to accompany Tenma on his journey. Tenma says that with such a face. He says he's the only one here who's disappointed. The dolphin calls Tenma very angry. The dolphin says that this time he'll create a space just for the two of them inside the room. He says that he was actually the lucky one who found the dolphin that day. The dolphin tells! The man explains that in a previous world, no matter what he did, it was never worth it, and he escaped reality by finding solace in video games. He reports that he was genuinely surprised upon hearing this, as Tenma proved so resilient and even seemed to be receiving. The woman explains that the condition for completing the training is either completing 3 months or reaching level 10. The man reveals that the woman he met was no ordinary reincarnation agent, and that encountering her was a misfortune. Tenma says that now that he thinks about it, it was said earlier that if the training had ended normally within 3 months, they wouldn't have been able to communicate so freely. Tenma talks about the greeting at the training base for reincarnated people. A man is eating, and in the background, a boy is running down a slope. He says it's been 15 years, and it really has been a long time. He says he thought he'd be in the training space forever, endlessly improving his skills. Tenma says that when his reincarnation began, he couldn't believe it either, but he was surprised that it took a whole month to notice the room after his reincarnation. The man explains that he had a reason. He'd been hiding in the forest this whole time. He explains that he did something nice for someone, but he was still perceived as suspicious, so he decided to avoid people. He reports that this was due to an unfounded lack of self-confidence. He says that when he plucked up the courage to talk to others, most treated him like. Tenma says he wants to hear good news from Gale. Gale replies, "Ah! Ah!" The dolphin says it will be faster if he sees it for himself. He stands and watches the dolphin jump out of the water. "Okay." Tenma says that here it is. Tenma walks towards the small creature. He says that this is his room and that the objects are his furniture. The man asks if this is it. Tenma says he's given up hope, thinking everything will start over with reincarnation. Tenma thanks Gale and says it's good news. He says something is wrong. He says it's the pantry. The boy says these are supplies he's been gradually accumulating to fix the bugs. The man explains that the food is probably expired. The boy holds up a bottle and explains that it's from the Tensei Mai no Tutorial de Isekai Saikyo ni Narimashita series. The guy says he's going out for a bit and asks what he's going to do about it. Tenma says he's against it, despite his good intentions, because this action could cause problems in the village. Tenma asks why he's against it. The man says he'll explain. A suspicious boy of unknown origin appears in a poor, remote village. He warns that greedy people will surely come in droves and will stop at nothing. He explains that Tenma's good intentions could backfire if it suddenly becomes known that he has supplies, like elixirs. Tenma reports that the bottle opens with a click. Girl says the drink is delicious. Then the girl drinks from the bottle. Tenma explains that over 15 years, he has accumulated an incredible amount of effort in the training space, and his level of mastery far exceeds what would be expected in terms of reincarnation. He explains that there are reincarnated people who, having gained too much power, end up being exploited, feared, or arrogant, and the guy says it's not just the wind, but something stronger, and he explains it's a hurricane. The girl explains that hurricanes can be very dangerous and advises everyone to be careful. The girl reports that she has a fever. The boy reports that May has opened her eyes, and the girl calls out to May. The boy asks Misha why he's crying. Misha says he feels relieved that May has opened her eyes. Tenma says that May was unconscious due to a high fever, but the man Lang's brother brought gave her a special medicine, and she got better. Tenma confirms this with the word yes. Girl says she understands. The man with the ears thanks everyone and his father. Tenma explains that he wants them to imagine meeting a 12-year-old girl for the first time. He explains that if she suddenly pulled out a very expensive elixir, it would seem strange. It is reported that if Tenma's abnormal abilities or reserves are discovered, great chaos is likely to occur. He says he understands, and the man next to him explains that he understands, but still, the man states that even if Tenma wants to give her the elixir, he wants Tenma to do exactly as he says. Dolphin tells me to make a lot of scratches on this bottle first. He says why and expresses bewilderment. The girl asks why they're being given such a valuable and expensive medicine even though she doesn't even know them, and asks who he really is. Tenma looks surprised. He says he's late for the show and announces that it's his wife, Sasha, who welcomes the introduction. She says she's pleased to meet him. The man expresses surprise and asks if it's true. Melon announces that this is her daughter and asks to call her May. Misha explains that she is his daughter-in-law and welcomes the introduction. Tenma says that May resembles her daughter. The girl asks if she's seen this guy before. He explains that this medicine has been passed down in his family for generations and his grandfather gave it to him when he went on a journey. The man asks Tenma why he has something like an elixir. Tenma tells Gale that it should be okay. Gale explains that his grandfather always helps those in need. The girl says she understands. The boy with the tail explains to the girl that because the item looked so old, it was something very precious to her family. He states that he feels a little guilty for accepting it and addresses the boy with the tail as Lord He. A girl thanks Tenma for something very valuable. Tenma asks to let him repay it somehow, and the girl addresses someone with an affectionate address. He says he was glad to help. The man thanks Tenma and calls him May's savior. The girl reports that Tenma-kun is in pain because of the man's actions. The man apologizes. Tenma explains that the pain isn't severe, but the beastman's strength is incredible. The woman says she can't understand why the guy with the tail doesn't want to go into town, and he explains that there are too many people and noise there. The girl on the bed says she doesn't like the city either, and the guy with the ears adds that it's better to stay here. He watches them from the doorway of the room, then goes out the window. In the background, two houses are depicted against a backdrop of mountains and sky. Tenma receives a lick on the cheek from an animal. He says he couldn't go into the room because it would cause problems if they found out he wasn't sleeping in the barn. The man says he saved his daughter and offers him the use of his bed while he himself will sleep in the barn. He says, "Good morning." Tenma knocks on the door and says, "Good morning." May opens the door and says, "Good morning too." Tenma calls out to May and says, "Langa-san is here." May points toward the house and says he's there. The woman says she's glad Mei-chan is recovering, and Mei-chan confirms this. The man greets Mealing and wishes her good morning, and Mealing responds in kind. The girl explains that the man arrived yesterday from another village. He announces that they've arrived, and the woman says that 10. A man reports that the only water source in the village is deep. A man with ears lifts a bucket of water, while several children and a girl stand nearby. The man with ears pulls a rope, lifting the bucket of water. The man says that if he forces his savior to do this, Sasha will be angry with him. Tenma apologizes. Tenma explains that he owes it to Langa-san and the village. The man with the ears says that he will also speak well of Sasha. He says he'll take charge of everything, turning to his brother. The girl with the ears thinks everything is happening exactly as she expected. The woman announces that the food is almost ready. Tenma sits at a table and listens. A man and a girl with ears sit at another table and look towards the woman. The girl says she realized it was him who helped her in the forest. The man is surprised and asks what they said. He says, "Wow, really? The girl explains he's been in the forest for over a month, the man exclaims, turning to Tenma. In the rightmost panel, a man says that another man is too clueless. In the middle panel, Tenma stands next to a girl with ears and smiles. In the left panel, Tenma looks ahead with a serious expression. He announces that he has arrived. The man on the sofa says that he has already been waiting. Tenma announces his return and greets Gale. Gale returns the greeting. Tenma explains that a week has passed and the girl is feeling well. Gale says she's happy and asks if Tenma plans to give his wife turkey again. He says he'd like to, but it's not possible right now, and asks if something's wrong. The man reports that he heard him give a turkey as a token of gratitude, and that the village chief, his son, and other villagers complained that it was unfair. He explains. Tenma says that in that case, they should have learned their lesson by now and hunted on their own. The man says that he promised to divide the spoils fairly. The man turns to Ujion, making a growling sound. Tenma says that! Well! The man explains that turkeys are intelligent and have good eyesight, so they immediately run away at the sight of a bow, making them difficult to hunt. He explains that he can catch many turkeys himself, thanks to his throwing skills, but he doesn't want the village elder's family to know about his skill level or his supplies. The monster says Tenma's method is too good for the guy, which calms him down, and Tenma says he won't be a good guy forever. The monster explains that even with such an increase, the balance of the monster ecosystem can shift. He says that he believes that he still has things he can do for Langa and that village, and that he wants to repay the favor before he leaves. Tenma explains that he understands his interlocutor's feelings, but asks him not to draw too much attention, then says he'll be careful. The guy explains that he feels emotionally disconnected from Misha and wants to at least get a little closer to her before leaving. He says he's finished cleaning and tells him to just watch him. The creature asks what he's going to do. He's standing in front of a waterfall. The animal says it's a waterfall and that it wanted to show Tenma this place. Tenma thanks the animal and says that it has something else besides that. The baby whale says he is the best, and he explains that even someone as calm and level-headed as he is can't help but be touched by this. The man says that the guy is a complete loser. Another man asks who exactly he's talking about. The man explains that he's talking about Tenma. Tenma stands there with a gun and listens. He says that before his arrival, the number of monsters suddenly increased. The man says this while standing with a woman and holding a bottle. The man reports that the traveling merchant Solon, who was supposed to bring the adventurers, still hasn't arrived in the village even a month after the appointed time. Tenma listens silently. A man asks Misha to help him find another person's weakness and says that if he succeeds, he can help him fulfill a dream that doesn't belong to Misha herself. The boy with the tail says no. The man and the boy remain silent. Tenma explains that the guy is mysterious and acting suspiciously, but he's his niece's savior. The man says Tenma is only mistaken because his parents are important and calls him a complete piece of trash. The man explains, so Tenma doesn't misunderstand? He says he will fulfill his dream with his own strength. The man says, no, Ka's daughter-in-law is really stupid. The other man explains this with a grin. Tenma looks into the distance. The man announces that he is leaving. Tenma stands with the children in his arms, and the boy next to him says that he wants to go too. He says that this needs to be fixed, somehow. Tenma announces the chapter title, Orca's Functions and the Dark Conspiracy. The man and Tenma stand back to back. A woman asks how things have been going lately. The man explains that working with deities in sales is very difficult, especially with polytheistic family gods and their complaints. The young man says that in his time, sales also faced many difficulties. The elevator button panel displays the floors. The man tells Anna the elevator doors close. The man asks the girl if she's heard how things are going with Tenma. The girl says she means Tenma. The man says that if it's him, according to customer service, there have been no complaints. The man understands this. The woman explains that it's not uncommon for reincarnated people to gain abilities too quickly and cause problems in the new world, but this guy seems fine. The man says he initially thought he was timid and unreliable, but now remembers him making his own decisions and being reserved but reliable. The man says he's concerned about the type of problematic people Tenma attracts and asks who these problematic people are. The girl asks what kind of people he means and asks if Tenma is attracted to them. The man repeats the word, problematic people. The girl explains that the unfortunate type of people for whom envy immediately turns into resentment cannot cope with this feeling, so they begin to hate and resent another person if they envy someone more capable than themselves. The woman explains that they irrationally assume the person who made them feel inferior must be a cheater or dishonest. She explains that this is a cognitive distortion that only reinforces their delusions. The woman reports that they believe this person is deceitful and evil. The man explains that Tenma's talents and potential aren't something others can achieve through sheer effort, so he's bound to make enemies among such people. The girl remains silent. The woman says this means Tenma will be trapped no matter what he does. The man explains that this is exactly the case, and for such a person, Tenma's humble nature only makes the situation worse. The man explains that Tenma needs someone on his side who is assertive, intelligent, and willing to get his hands dirty, but that such a personality is completely at odds with Tenma's character. The man says he's fed up with this arrogant little bully. The man asks Ujironi if he called him and orders him to deal with it. The man asks who exactly. The other man says it's the bully who embarrassed him over the guinea fowl and adds that he understands. The man says this guy is suspicious because he's working hard at something that doesn't benefit him at all, and his past is unclear. He's definitely up to something. The man calls him this guy. Tenma says that that guy is greedily taking all the guinea fowl and is a selfish swindler, and that the stupid villagers start supporting Tenma and the Ranga family. A man says something's been wrong here since someone showed up, with monsters appearing more frequently than usual and the traveling merchants no longer coming. Another man says that would be bad and they'll lose their position. The first man explains that for now it could be a coincidence, but if something happens, the man tells him to put the firewood in the designated place. Then the man says, "It is Zlatan," and Zlatan answers briefly, "Oh!" A man reports that the firewood burns quickly and that the village has become more populated lately, with more troubled residents among them, making things more complicated. Another man addresses the first man, calling him Dad, and says he has a good idea. A man with a mustache and another man are discussing someone going too far, and one of them laughs. The man with the mustache says someone is going too far, and the man with the mustache and glasses expresses surprise and excitement. The man with the mustache asks if that's too far. The man says his father is too soft, so everyone takes advantage of him. The father says he'll take care of it himself. Guy is silent. The man says his name is Langa and allows him to go out. The man says he has no intention of surrendering and says that if the enemy is willing to fight, he's ready. The man explains that he's not afraid and intends to defend what's dear to him. The man asks who sent him to follow him. Tenma stands up abruptly. The man asks Tenma to teach him. The man says no one asked him to do this. He says he saw how much the man had done for the village and simply felt it. The man explains that he wants to become stronger for the sake of his wife, daughter, and village. Tenma says he better talk to Gale first before answering Lang, explaining that he understands his feelings. The man begs for an answer, pleading, and says he's serious, but can't give an answer right away. He says he doesn't understand why his interlocutor, being so young, is so modest. He tries to come up with a natural response and explains that his interlocutor is technically in his 40s, after which he starts saying, "Oh, and well, oh, and dat." Tenma says that this happened thanks to his grandfather, who is also his mentor. The guy with the ears says that whoever entrusted Tenma with the elixir is a great benefactor to everyone, and that's logical. He asks what the guy's grandfather's name is, and he tells him this. The man says the name Gale. The monster is surprised and asks who the grandfather was, and Tenma explains that he was mistaken and simply asked the name of his mentor. The cat informs him that it's too late to fix the situation quietly and carefully, and that the best option is for him to leave the village, but he probably doesn't want that. He says he still has unfinished business! Tenma says that if he agrees to train Langa, he asks if he has a method. The man says he can adapt a technique from an old online game from his past life. Tenma explains that the real problem is Ujio, and that the enemy could threaten more than just him. He says he'll do whatever Gale says. The man says he agrees without even hearing the plan and confirms it. He expresses surprise. Tenma says he trusts Gale, and that's enough for him. Gale tells him to listen carefully and remember everything. He must live up to that trust. Gale explains that they'll start somewhere first, then notes that Tenma makes excellent iced coffee. Tenma says he understands, and he says this is the history of the village. The man says that you can say whatever you want about the content, but the art is surprisingly good, and also says that, in any case, it is art. 3 men descend the stairs. The man says he called Tenma today to start work. Tenma says the word work with a questioning intonation. The man says that anyone who doesn't contribute according to their abilities doesn't deserve to live in this village. He agrees. The woman explains that what the man says isn't entirely wrong, but his standards are simply ridiculous, greedy, and completely unfair. The The man says he's sending Tenma to look for the missing merchant Solon. The man asks what he's going to do and says he'll leave it to himself. The man says he entrusted Solon with half the money to hire adventurers and suggests Solon must have run off with it. The mustachioed man says Solon isn't the type to do such a thing. The woman explains that Tenma is only 14 years old and can't be entrusted with such a mission. A man explains that people with high abilities are given missions, even if they're ungrateful bastards. Another man says he really needs to be made to understand this and utters the word guinea fowl. The man asks what will happen if Tenma refuses and says that in that case, he will simply be kicked out. Another man explains that it's just. He informs that if he refuses, he must be told that Lang's family will be punished as punishment for him taking advantage of the village. The man says that if it comes to a fight, he'll order Zlatan to beat him up somewhere no one will see. The man explains that even as his own son, Zlatan is trustworthy and then lets out a cuckoo laugh. The man explains the situation and says he can refuse. The man explains that if he refuses, he'll have to supply 5 guinea fowl every month. Tenma says he understands and will look for Solon. The woman says she knew it, and the man next to her expresses surprise. The man with the mustache and the other man are also surprised. He says that since he owes it to the village, he will do everything he can. A man with animal ears expresses confusion. 2 men say they don't understand what's wrong with the guy and asked if he's an idiot. Tenma says he's suddenly making unreasonable demands, just as Gale predicted, and asks if the next stage of development will be as precise. The man with the mask says that it is Zlatan, and he will accompany the interlocutor so that he does not do anything strange. Tenma says that this will really help and notes that the accuracy of these predictions is almost frightening.